So, Rastas and Maroons in Jamaica's Senate, a ban on hair discrimination, beach access for Jamaicans. Look, I like some of what I see in the PNP manifesto. I have issues with other things. So let's talk about that. I'm Dion Jackson Miller. Thanks so much for joining me. Time for tea. So there's a lot in the PNP manifesto. I'm going to focus in this video on some of the legal and constitutional proposals they're making. Some I like, some I have some issues with. Let me start with the Senate. And before I even say anything else or explain anything, I'm going to kick off with one of my major beefs, which is one of their proposals, which is to put members of the diaspora or a representative of the Jamaican diaspora in the Jamaican Senate. No! What is this obsession that our politicians have with this proposal about putting members of the diaspora in the Jamaican Parliament, which is what the Senate is, the upper house of the Jamaican Parliament? Look, like all of you, I have relatives who live abroad. I have friends who live abroad, right? And a lot of them do a whole lot for this country. I appreciate that. I respect that. We should honor that, and we can do that in all kinds of different ways, all right? Put them on advisory committees, give them national honors, all kinds of things, fine. But I draw the line at this idea that we must put a diaspora representative in our Senate, which is part of our parliament that passes laws for the country. Why are we talking about putting members of the diaspora, which by definition means people who don't live here, into our parliament to pass laws for those of us who live here? Or you must be passing laws for a country you don't live in. That makes sense? And I promise you, if we ever get to the point where we are having any kind of serious conversation about this, I'm going to make it my personal mission to campaign against it on every single forum. It's nonsense. It's pandering. We don't need to stop it. So yeah, for me, failing grade for this particular proposal. Foolishness. So the Senate, as I said, that's the upper chamber of Parliament, right? The lower chamber is the House of Representatives. That's where the MPs sit. 63 MPs are the whole way elect. The Senate now is made up of nominated members. So you have members who are nominated by the leader of the opposition. You have members who are nominated by the Prime Minister. And there is concern when you talk about constitutional reform and governance issues. There's concern in some circles that the Senate, which is part of our lawmaking body, some people think it should be elected, not nominated. I have thoughts on that, but I'm not going to go into them now because I do think that needs a whole video for itself. Suffice it to say, I do have some concerns about the idea of an elected Senate, but as I said, another video for that. The PNP's proposal doesn't seem to be making any radical change. They look as if they're still talking about a nominated Senate. So it looks like what they want to do is to keep the status quo in place, but mix it up a little bit. So they said they want to expand the Senate to broaden representation. Apart from representatives of the diaspora, which is what I was just quarreling about, they want to see members representing persons with disabilities and the Rastafari and Maroon communities. Now, they don't say exactly how they want to do this, and it would seem to me you would have to have a separate section of the Senate. So you would still have the section with members chosen by the Prime Minister, members chosen by the leader of the opposition, and then another section now chosen perhaps either by the Governor General or by some kind of independent committee. Again, I'm curious as to how this would work. So you have several Maroon communities. All of them don't say eye to eye. They would have to choose a representative, or I don't know, a representative be chosen from them. Again, the devil here might be very much in the details. How this is going to work? Can it work? And why those groups? Are there other groups that we should see represented as well? Then now the PNP is promising to replace a British monarch with a Jamaican president chosen by and accountable to the people. Also making the Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ, Jamaica's final appellate court, replacing the United Kingdom's Privy Council. So a couple of things here. One is wanting to talk about replacing the British monarch. There's definitely no consensus as to how the monarch should be chosen, whether it is by the politicians, by the parliament, or whether the people should have a say in this. The PNP is saying here that the people should choose the Jamaican head of state, the Jamaican president, and again, I think we'd want to know how is that going to work, what is being envisaged here. Look, I agree with both of these ideas, in terms of getting rid of the British monarch. Definitely we need to get rid of the king. Definitely we need a Jamaican head of state. Definitely we need to get rid of the Privy Council. I agree with that. The problem here is that the PNP is promising things it can't do by itself. They can't tell you definitely they'll get rid of the king. They can't definitely tell you they'll get rid of the Privy Council, because both of those things need support from both the government and the opposition. And frankly, having torpedoed the JLP government's attempt to remove the king as head of state, if they come into office, I think they're going to find themselves with serious problems in trying to get support from any JLP that's in opposition. Apart from saying that they wouldn't support removing the king without removing the Privy Council as well, they also refused to attend meetings of the parliamentary committee that was looking at the report that came from the Constitutional Reform Committee. That I thought was a big mistake. I don't care if you disagree with the government's approach or the way the government was going about things. You need to go to the meeting them the way they went to the meetings of the Constitutional Reform Committee, but they should have gone to the parliamentary committee meetings as well. Especially now, where we increase your salary, you need to go and meet in them. We're paying you for that. Anyway, so yes, suppose the PNP wins now and they're trying to do this. They're trying to remove the king. They're trying to remove the Privy Council. I think we can expect political backlash. As I said, I think we can expect that the JLP would refuse to cooperate with them. I would be pleasantly surprised if I were wrong. And I think that we, the people, will continue to be stuck with the king and the Privy Council as we have been since independence. And I just don't know that the two parties right now can get past this roadblock, which, by the way, is of their own making, and them make it. The PNP is also promising to strengthen parliamentary accountability through impeachment and recall procedures and have committees chaired by opposition members as parliamentary committees. So I agree with this, but I do think it needs to be said explicitly that the standing orders of parliament have to be amended so that governments can't just do what they feel on this particular issue every time a government change, a policy change. So it needs to be in the standing orders of parliament. I also think something needs to be said about making sure these committees actually meet, because just putting an opposition member in charge of a committee doesn't mean the committee is going to meet. And for instance, I don't have specific numbers for this video, but I certainly don't think over the last parliamentary term that parliamentary committees were meeting regularly and carrying out really robust oversight of what the government was doing, whether those committees were chaired by government members or opposition members. And I'll put in a request to parliament to get some specific data on that so I can do a whole video on that for you. All right. They said consideration of fixed election dates and term limits. All right, well, I promise to consider. Fine. I do think we need national conversations about that. The PNP is also promising engagement for a new phase of constitutional reform. We certainly do need that. The last phase of constitutional reform was not properly executed. There was not proper engagement. There was not proper public education on that. All right, there was some. I'm not saying there was none, but it wasn't done properly and it wasn't enough. They're promising to expand legal aid services to include civil and constitutional matters, ensuring that justice, they say, is not reserved for the wealthy. Again, I do support that. The Legal Aid Act is over 20 years old. There actually is a provision in the Act to allow for legal aid for civil matters. It was just never brought into effect. There were concerns as to whether we could afford it. Now that we're doing better economically, yes, it certainly is something we need to look at again, and I would support this. Complete the review of the Domestic Violence Act and implement recommendations to hold abusers accountable, including parish facilities, to provide places of safety and support for victims. Now, we did see the government make some reforms, but we do need a comprehensive overhaul, right? Also have to point out that this current government did improve the situation with shelters for victims of domestic violence. They promised 3. 2 were opened, and the Minister Babsy Grange had said that the 3rd one was being built. I haven't yet, though, seen the report as to whether that 3rd shelter was actually opened. So the PNP is promising to enact a basic financial services law to establish minimum service standards and improve access to banking services across the country. This would follow up on the very strong advocacy on this issue that's been done over the years by opposition member Fitz Jackson. Now, I'm not going to comment more on this, though, apart from saying that I would need to hear more and whether and how this would actually improve what is already in place and what the BOJ, the Bank of Jamaica, is now doing. They're promising to recognize the Jamaican language as an essential part of our national identity, to protect historically marginalized groups, particularly people of African descent, through a national ban on hair discrimination, reparations advocacy framework, legal protection of ancestral spaces and cultural practices, full recognition of Rastafari as an indigenous religion, reaching an accord with Maroon communities to give modern recognition to their ancestral treaty rights. So all this sounds good, but again, what is involved? Details are going to matter here. I'd want to hear more. I do think the government does need to step up and put in place a ban on hair discrimination. It's been going on for too long. It's embarrassing actually to see other countries which are not majority black countries implementing bans on hair discrimination, and we haven't. I'm also all for more recognition to be given to the Jamaican language or Jamaican Creole. I actually personally think it should be an official language along with English, but I'm not exactly sure what the PNP is recommending here. PNP needs to explain exactly what it is they're talking about, what it is they want to do, especially since the middle class in this country has a pathological fear of the Jamaican language, a fear of it being used in formal spaces, and they have especially a fear of it being used in schools, despite the research that has been done that shows how much it improves the teaching and learning process. I've been promising a video on the Patwa thing for a while, alright? So that's all I'm going to say here. On the need for tell me more exactly what it is you're proposing, we're not clear. Then now they're promising to advance gender equity, protection of the elderly and the rights of persons with disabilities. They're promising what they're calling a progressive beach access policy. They're promising to launch a ganja economic empowerment policy specifically for the Rastafari community. And they're promising to join the International Criminal Court. Again, a lot of that sounds good, but we need more details to really be able to have a proper discussion. The beach access promise jumps out at me because this is such a serious problem. We really need to address this. Jamaicans being shut out of our beaches. But again, I need details. The JLP government, for instance, for several years now has been promising us a new beach access policy. I know they've done a lot of work on it. The last I heard is that it was with cabinet, so we haven't seen the final document yet. I would also say I understand the attraction of saying you're putting in place a ganja policy for economic empowerment for Rastafari. But in reality, we have small farmers all over Jamaica who are not Rastafarians, who should be part of any ganja economic empowerment policy. And once we're talking about not religious issues, but using ganja to make money, I don't see why this should be confined to Rastafari. Again, sounds a little bit like pandering to me. Alright, so what do you think of the proposals? As always, I want to hear from you. Drop your comments below. Just keep it civil, alright? Like the video, share it with somebody you think might be interested. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. And click that notification bell so you know anytime I drop a new video. All of that helps the channel grow. I'm Dion. Thanks for watching. Going back to my tea.